What's going on, everybody? You are watching Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, is it time to panic? Because after going through the YouTube comment section, scouring the Twitter streets, it seems like some fans are acting like the season is over, and now some fans are remaining somewhat optimistic. But I do want to talk about, obviously, the X's and O's from yesterday's game. Mainly talk about the run defense and the injuries, top to bottom, but specifically on the offensive line. And then also, I want to kind of talk big picture Vikings here because, this offseason, they got super aggressive. Like, you spent a boatload of money in free agency. You really tried to shore up the trenches. And you were kind of banking on a 22-year-old quarterback in JJ McCarthy coming off a torn meniscus just to hit the ground running right away and to have him kind of spark this deep playoff run. So I want to talk about if that was the right move and then, also talk about last season and just connect it all. I got a lot of thoughts that I want to run through on today's show, but I do want to say thank you guys so much. Crossed over 62,000 subscribers here on the channel yesterday, so all credit to you guys. I know we asked you to subscribe a good amount, and it can get a little annoying here and there, but it really does help us grow this channel. So I really want to say thank you guys to all 62,000 people. For all of you guys that have hit that subscribe button, thank you guys so much. And if you aren't subscribed, change that, hit that subscribe button today. So did the Vikings risk too much on this season? That's kind of what I want to start off talking about here because, it's not just them spending big money in free agency. It's the type of free agents they brought in on both sides of the ball. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, and Ryan Kelly. All three of those guys are, at some point in their careers were elite linemen defensively or offensively. And then the other guy he brought in was Will Fries. Well, Will Fries last year played 4 games, got hurt for the remainder of the season, but he is still a young, promising offensive guard. So you bring in 3 veteran, 2 defensive linemen, 1 offensive lineman, and Ryan Kelly. So you put clearly a lot on the table for this season. Now, was that the right move, or should maybe the Vikings have kind of said, you know what? We're not going to treat this like an all-in year. We're going to roll some of that money over, let that young quarterback develop, and instead of almost like putting like so much pressure on the kid, where it's almost like where JJ is looking around at this roster and it's like, all right, we're stacked at D-tackle. We just won 14 games. Like, we're clearly going all in on this season, and I'm the guy that's got to take us over the hump while he's also, still rehabbing that torn meniscus. He just had a kid. Like, there was just a lot on his plate. So did the Vikings almost risk too much on the season? And also, going back to last year, like, this team winning 14 games, like, I don't want to say, like, that was a bad thing, but maybe did the Vikings think they were closer to contending than they really should have? Where, they were probably saying to themselves, man, last year we won 14 games. That was almost like a rebuilding year for us. Man, imagine what we do if we go have a big free agency. We get the most out of JJ McCarthy. So, like, that was their plan. And, like, on paper, that sounds fantastic. Where it's like, okay, we got this young rookie quarterback. We got Kevin O'Connell, who's going to develop him at a high level. Let's go, massively improve in the trenches, really lean into JJ's strengths because they obviously know JJ at Michigan, when was he playing his best football? That's when they were getting downhill. They were running. So clearly the Vikings this offseason, they said, hey, we're going to go get an improved offensive line. We're going to go trade for Jordan Mason. We're going to really try to be better in the trenches, have that young quarterback, spend a lot of money. Like, on paper, that makes a lot of sense. But also that's an incredibly risky move. And I think we're seeing the risk kind of come to fruition right now. Because now Ryan Kelly, I mean, is he going to be done? Like, this is his 5th concussion of his career. This is his 2nd in the last 3 weeks. I have doubts that he is going to play another snap with the Minnesota Vikings. But we'll see as we are getting some breaking news here. Cam Robinson is he getting traded to the Cleveland Browns. So we'll see Cam Robinson this weekend. I was just wondering if maybe the Vikings were trading for Cam Robinson if that Brian O'Neill injury was serious. But anyways, to kind of continue on here, like, you were putting a lot on this season. And, now Ryan Kelly out. Now Brian O'Neill potentially out for a long time. Still no update there. Like, if this season doesn't go wrong or doesn't go well, which it's kind of trending in that direction, like, could this have some serious ramifications for the next couple of seasons? Because let's talk about Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. These guys have been pretty disappointing, in my opinion. You got Allen on the books for 3 years. You got Hargrave on the books for 2 years. Now, you can't move off Hargrave's deal this offseason, take on a little bit of dead money, so it's not like you're locked into those guys. But, talking about stopping the run, here are their PFF grades. Jonathan Allen, run defense grade this year, 48.3. That is 138th out of all 178 eligible defensive tackles. Javon Hargrave, his run defense grade, 40.6. That is 161st out of all 178 defensive tackles. So clearly both those guys, not great at stopping the run, but also we knew that. And that's why it also makes that Harrison Phillips trade seem a little, confusing, because even though you got 2 6-round picks, Harrison Phillips was one of the best two-gappers in the league. So I don't know if maybe the run defense, maybe if Harrison Phillips was that important, that's why the Vikings are kind of getting ran on this year. But point being, with bringing in those two guys, like, let's just say if we're talking at the end of the year where it's like, oh, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave are almost net negatives for us. Well, then you just spent all that money on them this offseason, where you can't spend money in free agency next year because you are right now, I believe, $40 million in the hole. So how is the roster going to get better? Well, that comes back to the draft. And when you go all in on a year like this without drafting well over the last couple of years, if you do have injuries, we see the lack of depth on this team, like especially on the offensive line. I was actually, heading into the season, I was actually pretty curious about the Vikings' backup offensive line because you had a couple of good names there. Like, you like a Michael Juergens. At least Justin School on paper before the season looked like he was going to be a solid swing tackle. He's just one of the worst offensive linemen in the league. And now the Vikings just at a spot without drafting well, with missing on a couple of these free agents. How are we going to get better over the next couple of years without them hitting on draft picks? Now, you have 11 draft picks next season. You better hit on a couple of those. So, I don't know. Kind of the point I wanted to make was, did the Vikings almost risk too much on this season, putting almost too much pressure on this 2025 Vikings? Because now I'm just looking at avenues to get better over the next couple of years. Unless it's going to be a huge roster shakeup if this season really doesn't go well, I don't know. Just a little too risky. Now, I do want to close today's show out just more optimism for you guys. I think the biggest reason for the Vikings' slow start, and you can call this a loser answer, you can call this a typical excuse, but for me it's injuries. The Vikings are incredibly banged up. Obviously yesterday you lose 2 starting offensive linemen, and we saw yesterday, like, once Brian O'Neill went out, the whole offensive game plan changed, because I'm sure KOC was not going to let him go one-on-one against O'Neill every single time, but majority of the time he was probably comfortable being like, hey, O'Neill, we'll trust you over here. But then once he went out, it was Justin School in there. The Vikings had a tight end or a running back or a slot receiver chipping or just helping his way every single play, and this sets you behind the 8 ball offensively. So, like, that was obviously huge. And then same with, Ryan Kelly going out. That's a massive loss. You already had Donovan Jackson out there, so you have 3 backup offensive linemen. You got a backup quarterback. You still technically have your backup running back. Like, a lot's working against them. And plus, defensively, you're without Van Ginkel and Cashman. Like, those aren't just guys. Those are the second and third most important players defensively outside of Jonathan Grenard. I can make an argument that both those guys are as equal as important as Jonathan Grenard, with Blake Cashman being that green dot guy, that elite communicator, and we know how Flores, he'll show you a look. He wants his defense to adjust on the fly. Like, that's Cashman having those responsibilities. And then also Van Ginkel, think about a perfect scheme fit with the DC. Van Ginkel is just that. So, with all these injuries, I still think this Vikings team has a chance. It's just going to be an uphill battle. And, again, this is putting so much pressure on JJ where, this team probably still believes they can win. And it's going to be a trap game against the Browns this weekend, I'll tell you that. They got a great defensive line, especially with our injuries up front. But if you could somehow get the 3-2, you got the bye week, you should get healthy. But then there's just a ton of pressure on JJ where it's like, hey, man, we're still expecting to make the playoffs. We're still trying to win a playoff game. All right, you got to go beat the Eagles at home. Then you got to go put your old college coach, Jim Harbaugh, on the road. Then you're in Detroit. Then you're at home against the Ravens. And then it's like Seattle, Green Bay twice, Detroit another time, Washington. Like, there is no gimme game left for the Vikings besides this one against the Browns. And that's not really a gimme anymore. But again, point being, the NFL's hard. It's not really many gimme games out there at any point anyways. But it's just going to be a lot on this on the Vikings for the rest of the year. Now, I will say one last thing, and then we'll get out of here. If the Vikings lose to the Browns, it should be fully about developing JJ McCarthy this season. Because if you move the 2-3, you're not making the playoffs. Just call it like it is. You are a 2-3 football team with that schedule, especially with this NFC. You are not making the playoffs. If the Vikings lose, it should be all about finding an answer for JJ. And that either means developing him, getting him better week to week, or just giving yourself an answer on him. Because if JJ is not the guy, then you got to go look at another avenue this offseason. You got to go look at the draft. You got to maybe go look and trade for a guy. Because, again, there are a lot of veterans. There are a lot of good football players who are not just on the team this year, but for the next couple of years. So if you find out quickly that JJ is not the guy, at least there is a benefit to getting that answer. So Week 7, I fully expect to be JJ. But, again, if you lose to the Browns this weekend, you might just have to chalk it up to being like, hey, this season, just injuries, slow start, kind of derailed us. Obviously, still going to go out there and try to win football games, but it might have to turn over to, hey, we're just trying to develop JJ McCarthy. But, hey, we appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Should have a video later today about the Brian O'Neill injury news, so we get you guys that update there. But we appreciate all of you guys watching. As always, Skol Vikes.